AEW Fight Forever was delayed multiple times in the lead up to its release, meaning that they've had years to work on it with some of the biggest developers in the industry at the helm. With all of the hype and attention it's got from the media and big name YouTubers, there's one question that needs to be asked. Is it actually any good? There are lots of things to like and dislike about the game, so I'll be giving you all my thoughts whether they're positive or negative, and by the end of the video, you'll know whether or not you should buy AEW Fight Forever. I can tell you right now that my answer is no, but there are some big reasons for that, so hear me out. The first thing that I loved immediately about the game was just how fun and arcade-like the gameplay is. It really feels like a throwback to pro wrestling games of old, like WWF No Mercy and SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, and there's actually a good reason for that as well. Hideyuki Iwashita, better known as Gita, directed WWF No Mercy and was brought in on a consultancy basis to help develop Fight Forever. So all of the hard-hitting moves and over-the-top animations are a real throwback to that era of gaming that every pro wrestling fan adored. On top of that, Fight Forever is also developed by Yuke's and published by THQ Nordic, which is what THQ changed their name to in mid-2016. Yuke's and THQ were also the developers and publishers of SmackDown Here Comes the Pain and many other incredible wrestling titles around that time. So it's safe to say that not only was Fight Forever in very safe hands, but it was also guaranteed to have that OG pick up and play beat 'em up feel to it, which I believe has been sorely missed in this genre since those games were released in the early 2000s. If you think back to the impact of the finishing moves in those games, you'll have great memories of decimating people with Goldberg's spear or flying around the ring with Rey Mysterio. Well, I'm happy to say that all of that over-the-top goodness is back in Fight Forever. Every punch, kick, and grapple feels like it means something, and that's largely due to the small camera shake that occurs on impact of every single move. Then for bigger moves like finishes, you get a nice little slow-mo replay after you hit it, which is a nice touch. In terms of graphics, it's very cartoon-like as opposed to the 2K franchise, which tries to be the most realistic simulation on the market, and I think this is a great alternative to that. It makes the game seem a lot more fun rather than serious, which is what a wrestling game should be. There's never a dull moment, even if you're playing longer matches, as the time just seems to melt away. And alongside all these positives in the gameplay, the camera angle on the ring was also a nice switch up, and gives you a better view of the action while allowing you to see up the entrance ramp as well. Another thing I really like about the game is that they took time to make each individual character as unique as possible. Say you're playing as MJF and you find yourself on the receiving end of a beatdown, not to worry, you can simply flick twice in a sideways direction on your left stick to perform his own dodge animation, which is actually just him dropping to his knees and begging for mercy. Then in true MJF fashion, this can be cancelled at any time for you to strike the confused opponent. Another example is Orange Cassidy's hands in pockets gimmick, which you can do by clicking in the right stick at any time. While in pockets mode, you can do his 2-tap kicks and hit drop kicks whilst also being able to dodge attacks at the same time. Having little details like these in the game makes playing random matches more fun as you have new things to try out for each wrestler, and that is pretty necessary for this title as there's not a lot else to do in the game, but we'll get to that a little later on. Alongside being able to use moves that are unique to the character, the range of items and terrain that you can use in combat gives the game a bit more replay value. Whether you're breaking the barricade at ringside, riding a skateboard into someone's head, or throwing someone into the Titantron on stage, you'll never run out of fun things to try or ridiculous spots to set up. And this also ties in nicely with the arcade feel of the game because of just how slapstick it all is. Hitting each other with cricket bats, fire extinguishers and crowbars feels ridiculous, but it's the kind of mindless fun that you can sit and have fun with your friends with for hours. The game really doesn't take itself too seriously, and there's definitely a place for that in this very simulation-heavy era of wrestling games. In order to enjoy the fun gameplay and wide range of things to do in ring, you need a good amount of match types, and while there aren't a load of different options, the ones that AEW Fight Forever do have are a ton of fun. You can choose from regular 1v1, 2v2, triple threat and 4-way matches, or a casino battle royale, ladder match, and of course the infamous exploding barbed wire deathmatch. I think in later updates of the game they should introduce more match type variety, but for now this is a pretty good amount. What's important is that the action in the ring is fun, which will naturally make all of these options a good laugh. The Casino Battle Royale match is probably my favourite, as it's a unique take on a traditional Battle Royale, however it's a tiny bit frustrating as you can only have 4 wrestlers in the ring at one time. Also, I love how they animated the exploding barbed wire deathmatch to look how it should have done in real life and not what it actually ended up looking like. Finally, when it comes to things that I like about the game, the minigames they included are actually quite enjoyable. Sure, they're a little gimmicky and not very hard, but they give you something else to try if you're getting bored of the matches. All of them are easy to pick up and play, just like the rest of the game, so it's worth trying them out if you ever find yourself wanting to try something new. They also integrated these into story mode quite well, as you can play them for extra rewards and money, so you're not solely relying on your in-ring performances to prop you up. Overall, they fit in extremely well with the general vibe of the game, which is a fun little beat 'em up to sit and play for a few hours while you want to relax. Now onto things that I don't like about the game, or that I think could have been done better, and there are definitely a few of these. Perhaps the biggest one for me is the ridiculously shallow custom wrestler feature. Character creation is one of the biggest draws for the community, with games like WWE 2K18 and Fire Pro Wrestling having an insane amount of options for you to scroll through when making your wrestler. With around 60 different characters to choose from in Fight Forever, you aren't short of options, but naturally people will want to play as their favourite wrestlers from other promotions, and this game really doesn't give you a lot of options when creating them. In almost every category, the list is very short when customizing, meaning that you often have to either settle for the closest thing to what you wanted, or simply just not add it at all. Seeing how big the community is for stuff like this makes me wonder why they didn't spend more time on it, as it could have really added a lot more depth to the title. I'd like to imagine that in future updates there will be a load more options added, but for now this kind of sucks, and will be a big turn off for a lot of players. A big reason why having an in-depth creation center is so necessary for this game is because there really isn't a lot else to do in it. So far, the only modes there are to play are exhibition matches, mini-games, and the story mode, so once you've experienced all of that, there's not much else to it. To use 2K as an example, they've constantly been adding in and taking away game modes over their entire history, and don't get me wrong, sometimes they make some questionable decisions, but at least there's something for everyone. If you don't particularly enjoy actually playing the matches, you can play My GM mode. If you like collecting, there's My Faction, or if you just want to create your own perfect wrestling promotion, there's Universe mode, which all go into great depth in their own right. And that's not even mentioning the story-based mode, My Rise, which for me personally isn't a load of fun, but it's a story to get stuck into at least, and can provide hours of entertainment if that's your thing. Fight Forever needs more meat on the bones. At the moment it seems very shallow, like a demo of a game that we're waiting for the full release of. What we got was a lot of fun and is easy to pick up and play, but there's nothing in it that really draws you in and keeps you there. Which leads me on to another huge disappointment, the story mode, Road to Elite. Now, I get that it's supposed to be a throwback to older wrestling games with the text-based cutscenes and arcade-like feel, but there really isn't enough going on here for me. It took me 2.5 hours to play through the entire thing, and I can comfortably say that I wasn't immersed in one single feud that I was a part of. It feels like you're just thrown into random match after random match without any build-up or context. Then on top of that, because they need to give you something to do in the weekly shows leading up to your pay-per-views, you just end up fighting a bunch of random wrestlers who have nothing to do with the story. It makes the whole mode seem pointless to me, and kind of sums up how I feel about AEW in real life as well. All about the action, with the storylines as an afterthought. Don't get me wrong, the matches themselves were still fun to play, but I'd have really liked to care a lot more about them, rather than just beating up random opponents for the sake of it. So like the rest of the game, it's fun for a bit, but then it loses you. If only it had more to it, it could really be captivating. Instead, you're thrown into AEW as an established wrestler, even if you use a custom one, and given a title shot in the first pay-per-view. What happened to the mid-card titles, or tag titles? It'd be great to start from the bottom and work your way up. That way you can get far more invested in your character and their journey. To wrap things up, I wouldn't suggest buying this game at retail value. If you can get it on offer and fancy killing a couple of hours with your friends just beating each other up, then absolutely do that. But until it adds a lot more content into the game, I'd recommend giving it a miss. That's not to say that I don't think the game could be something really great in the future, but as of right now, I wouldn't recommend it. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more wrestling content, then you should check out our Jobbers Only series in 2K23 My GM. I've put the link for you to go and watch on screen now.